Hey, Fly Girl. I'm René Vengelstork, Aviation CEO, FAA board alum, and high performance coach. Whether you're chasing your first discovery flight or leading at 40,000 feet, this show is your runway for bold career moves, real mentorship, and stories from women rewriting their flight plan. From the cockpit to the control tower, we're building the future of aviation one fly girl at a time. Welcome to the Fly Girls Guide podcast. Hey, welcome to this episode of the Fly Girls Guide to Aviation Careers podcast. Today, I have a guest who has just inspired me over the years, and every time I meet her or see her or have the opportunity to hear her speak, I'm always blown away by her emotional intelligence and her badassery flying skills. Tammy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor. I love speaking with you.
Well, you have had a great career as a fighter pilot, and you're retired now, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about that later on in the podcast, but tell me what it means to be a fighter pilot.
Oh, wow. I've never thought through that. What does it mean to be a fighter pilot? I don't know. It means you're a badass, right?
100%.
That's the funniest thing is, say that again?
It's a prerequisite.
Yeah, it's funny because that's the most common word people use when they find out what I've done. I don't tag myself as that. That's what everybody else says. But yeah, it's really an aggressive career field, but it is so much fun, and it takes so much work, but there's so much reward.
I love it. Well, one of the rewards is protecting the freedoms of the United States of America. That's
absolutely.
At the highest, most altruistic level. Tell us what you do on a day-to-day basis. Well, what did you fly? And then tell us what you were doing on a day-to-day basis in that role.
Well, I flew several aircraft. I started off in the T-37 as an instructor pilot. My next assignment was in the A-10, which is a single-seat attack aircraft protecting and defending our troops on the ground. I had cervical spine reconstruction in 2006, so I transitioned to flying remotely piloted aircraft, so the Predator and the Reaper. And then I ended my career after getting a waiver for my neck in teaching in the T-38 Talon. So that's our fighter trainer teaching the next generation of fighter pilots. So day to day looks different depending on the platform you want to talk about. So if you wanted to talk about the day in the life of a fighter pilot, we could start there if you want. I would say typically when I was, let's just for reference, I'll talk about flying in Korea because that's where I had my most operational experience. There's a lot of studying. I would say you study and prep half the day, fly the other half of the day, I would say. Sometimes you would fly 2 or 3 times and your entire day is flying. Sometimes you study or do your side job for the entire day. It depends, but in order to be a good fighter pilot, you absolutely need to study, spend time in the books, keep up with everything that's going on, all the upgrades to the aircraft, the weapons, the systems, because flying is now second nature and it's employing the aircraft that is the primary thing.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Like what goes on in your head when you're flying the aircraft, because you're doing that just by habit almost, and then you're employing the aircraft as a weapon. That's a different kind of flying.
Yeah. So a lot of people think about this concept when they're flying, but it applies, I would say, even more so when you fly an aircraft is the idea, are you strapping into the aircraft or are you strapping the aircraft on? It's really important as a fighter pilot that the aircraft is an extension of you and you are in charge of it, you are in control of it, and you are one with it. And I know that sounds maybe a little, I don't know, woo-woo or whatever, but it's really super important because like we were talking about, the employment of the aircraft is now your main job. And it's a matter of constantly taking in data. So again, flying the aircraft is just kind of in the back of your mind. You're doing it naturally. And now it's looking for the target, mapping the target, figuring out where your flight lead is or where your wingman is, depending on if you're leading or you're the wingman. Where are the enemies? Is there, is your radar warning receiver going off saying there's a bad guy around, or there's a surface attack missile, targeting you? There's just it's a lot of data that you have to filter through. And so it's really an intense, I would say we flew in the A-10, we fly a little longer than some fighter jets. So like 2 hours we would be airborne. It's a very intense 2 hours. And especially as you get lower to the ground, things can get more dangerous because things can happen faster, but it's amazing. It is super fun. And I absolutely loved having the role of protecting our troops on the ground.
I love it. So for those people who don't know, what is an A-10 used for?
Yeah, so it's a single-seat attack aircraft, and it's literally built around a 20-foot gun that holds 1,169 rounds of 30 millimeter. So if those who are watching on video, you can see this is the size of one.
Oh my gosh. It's as big as your forearm.
Yeah, so it is literally built around the gun, and the purpose of it is to protect our troops on the ground. It has very big fat wings, so it turns really well, and it can fly low to the ground and maneuver really quickly. I mean, even just having the A-10 show up and do a show of force oftentimes was all that was needed to protect our good guys from the bad guys, and because it's scary, especially if you hear the gun actually shooting. So we protected the troops on the ground. That's the main mission.
I can imagine that that's really intense with the flying and the shooting and the defending and all of the things when you're in the moment. What kind of toll does that take on you emotionally when you're preparing for that, when you're performing, and then when you're doing your after action review?
Now, is that question like if I were to actually, I'm just asking if that's like actually employ and use the weapon, or are you asking just in general, like that intensity?
In general. I mean,
Okay.
Either way, right? Some missions you're just showing up and you just need to be there.
Yeah.
Right. But even like the emotional preparation for that, I imagine is pretty intense. It's not just the physical and the mental preparation, but you have to have emotional preparation.
Correct.
To be a soldier or a fighter pilot.
Well, let me share a story with you then, because I think this is kind of the question you're asking. When my first assignment, like I told you, was as an instructor pilot in the T-37, which is pilot training. That was the first trainer that they flew back in the day. It's not flown anymore, but so I was an instructor pilot, and my next assignment was a fighter aircraft, and I was filling out my dream sheet. Which fighter do you want? And it really kind of hit me. I'm in my early 20s, and I thought, oh, can I actually do this job? Ultimately you have to think about the end state. The end state is I take lives if I do my job. And can I do that? And so I went through a process of talking to a lot of people. I talked to the chaplain on the base. I talked to fighter pilots in different airframes and went through the process of, can I do this? And I ended up talking to an A-10 pilot, and I said to him, I don't know. The A-10s fly really low, and man, I might see who I'm targeting. And they looked at me and they said, yeah, that's true, but you are also going to see who you're defending. And that was all I needed. I mean, as someone who played soccer for 10 years of my life, and I know this seems like a strange comparison, I loved playing defense. I could care less about scoring goals. I wanted all my teammates to do that. I loved playing defense, guarding our goal. And so this to me was kind of stepping into that role in a much bigger way, protecting people. And, when someone explained it to me that way, it allowed me to process it differently. And so, you go through the process of what is this job? What could I do? And like you touched on it, you have to be emotionally prepared. And some people, they don't think about that in advance. They just go, full throttle towards their objective, not even really realizing the implications of it. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think it's valuable information.
It answers my question beautifully, because I think you have to become really self-aware to be able
Absolutely.
to say, could I take a life?
Yes.
And
It's not an easy conversation. No.
It's not.
No.
It's not. And if you're not brutally honest with yourself about that going in for the right reasons, if you're just going in because those are really amazing aircraft to fly, then you pay the price on the back end, I think. And I think that we see quite a bit of that. But maybe lightening this up just a little bit. What's the path into becoming a fighter pilot? What was your path into that?
Yeah, so my path is interesting because I was always interested in the military, but I knew nothing about it except for G.I. Jane, right? Or any movie where you saw basic training. And all I could think of is, I can't do that. Instantly it was like, no way. But I still had something tugging in my heart that says I just wanted to serve. And so I ran into a Navy guy when I was taking a college class in high school, and I said, hey, I'm interested in the military. I'm thinking the Navy. And he said, I think you should go to the Air Force. And so I decided to check it out. I went to Air Force ROTC, and I asked him, I knew I wanted to go to college, and I already had some college done. So I didn't really want to look at the academy because I had to do 4 years at that point. So the Air Force Academy is an option. And I didn't look into that. So I went to Air Force ROTC because I knew I wanted to go to college. And so you can go to almost not any college, but a lot of colleges have Air Force ROTC. So I went to the University of Minnesota, and I said, hey, tell me about this program. And I literally was just going to serve my 4 years and be done. And one of the questions they asked me, which makes complete sense, but I was caught off guard because I just wasn't prepared. And this is where the story gets not interesting, but this is going to be useful to the audience. They said to me, well, do you want to be a pilot? And that was the first time I'd ever thought about being a pilot. I didn't know any pilots. I'd never met a pilot. I don't know if I'd ever even seen a pilot except for the one flight I took when I was like 10. And I don't even know if I saw the pilot then. And so I thought about it for about, 2 seconds. And yeah, I want to do that. I was a roller coaster kid, a tree climber, a gymnast. And this seems perfect. I want this office in the sky with the best view that I can be active and so it changed my world because I hadn't thought about it. And I know that's part of why you're putting this podcast out, is people can see that others have done this, and I hadn't seen that. So that's where the path began. And I applied for the program. I got into the program. I got a pilot slot. I went to pilot training. I went down the fighter bomber track, ended up in a fighter aircraft, just kept going and going and going. But I'm glad the Air Force was wise enough. When I graduated pilot training, it was a little bit sad for me because I wanted to go fighters. It was my ego that was really involved. And I'm not too afraid to share that when my ego was big, I was like, I want this fighter jet because that was the coolest thing. You get the most, pats on the back for that. And I'm not proud of that, but we all have those moments. And I got stuck with teaching in the T-37 when my friends go fly F-16s and F-15s, and I'm going to sit here and fly the same flight, doing stalls, spins, and getting puked on. But the truth is, it was the best thing for me because I was so new to this community. I didn't really understand, and it gave me time to process through some of the stuff we already talked about, but just kind of grow in general as an officer, as an aviator, as a person.
What do you think has been the biggest challenge to your aviation career? Hey friends, are you dreaming of a career in aviation or ready to level up the one you've already started? Whether you're a student, a career changer, or a seasoned pro, you are invited to our free virtual aviation career fair happening November 5th. Meet recruiters from top aviation companies, explore career paths you never knew existed, and even sign up for interviews. It's completely free, but space is limited. Register now at weareflygirls.com/careers and take off toward your future in aviation.
Myself. Yeah, I would say, and that's why, you mentioned we'll get to this later, but that's why I teach what I teach now, because my path would have been much easier if I hadn't been so hard on myself and had this mindset where I was just constantly fighting myself. I lacked confidence, and I didn't know how to build it. I mean, no one teaches that. So now I teach that. How do you get there? And so that was my biggest struggle, was getting in my own way, in my own head, not thinking I could. Lots of imposter syndrome, wondering, how did I get here? Was I just lucky? Everybody else is more qualified than me. And having those thoughts, and eventually realizing that everybody has those thoughts, maybe at different volumes, different levels, but everyone does, and it's okay.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. What do you teach?
Yeah, well, I teach mental performance training, because my thought is that, a lot of times when I was teaching students to fly, I focused a lot on the individual and what was going on in their own mind. And I knew that I couldn't get them to perform how they needed to if they were in their own head. And so before I could get them to get the skill or do the thing, I had to get them out of their own head. So I spent a lot of time on that, studying that. And I didn't even realize, essentially, I was teaching mental performance training, which is the same kind of training elite athletes are using now. So teaching, how to not be a perfectionist, how to get over failures quickly and use them for your benefit and not to your detriment, because failures inform you. They don't define you. How to increase your focus, how to increase your confidence. And so I teach that now, because I think that a lot of instructors, they'll say, you need to get over your mistakes. You need to focus. You need to this, you need to that. And those are all valid. But nobody ever teaches the students how to do that. So they don't ever get better. And I saw too many instructors coming back from flights saying things like, oh my God, I can't believe that so-and-so did A, B, C, D. And I'm thinking, well, nobody here is trying to suck. So you need to figure out what it is they're struggling with so you can help get them over that hurdle. I really think that as an instructor, it was up to me to modify my instruction based on where the student was at academically, flying, emotionally, mentally, and how they learned. And I don't expect the student to modify how they learn based on how I teach, which is how a lot of instructors do it. They have their one way, and if you can't get it, you can't get it. And this leads me to a common thing with flying. People say you either have it or you don't. And I completely disagree. There are some people that are wired better than others for resilience, perseverance. They move on quickly, they can compartmentalize, but it does not mean you can't because you don't now. It is a learnable skill. And my path would have been much smoother had I known lots of these things back then.
I think it's really interesting. One of the reasons that I ended up getting my pilot's license, and my objection was, I don't think I have good enough situational awareness to be a good pilot. And the woman who finally got me over that hump said, piloting teaches you situational awareness. You become more aware of everything in your life once you develop skills as a pilot. And I think I hear you saying exactly that same thing. You begin to develop the skills once you get out of your way in your brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's important that you get out of your own way, because the tagline for my business is, because you can't just pull over on a cloud. So you have to stay in the game.
That's good. You do. You have to recover. You have to make quick decisions, and you have to make really good decisions. And they need to be second nature.
Yeah, and it's not about perfection. It's about, recovery from those small errors, big, whatever it is, minimizing the errors, keeping them small, and then recovering from them quickly. I told all my students before I flew with them, there is no perfect flight. And the only difference between you and me is how many mistakes you make and how big they are. Because I make them too. They're just smaller and less. And as it should be, I'm the instructor. But when I make a mistake, I will show you how I recover from them. Not only what do I physically do with the aircraft, but what am I doing emotionally and mentally to move on? Because that matters. Otherwise, you get sucked in and spiral down and end up in a bad place. I know a lot of people worry about that. They're like, what if something goes wrong? What if I don't handle it properly? Well, let's deal with that in advance so you do handle it properly.
Oh, that's gold. Absolute career gold right there. Tammy, I hear you saying things like, you need resiliency. You need to be able to have emotional intelligence. You need to get out of your own way. You need to be a risk taker. You need to have passion. I'm hearing all of these things come out in your answers. Are there any qualities when you meet younger men and women now that they exhibit that you're like, oh yeah, they're going to be good. They're really going to learn well. They're going to be an asset to their company. I can't wait to see where they go. What are those qualities?
Well, let's refer back to, I give a keynote speech on basically how everybody needs to utilize mental performance training. Like, it's just good for everyone. And one of the things I talk about is not quitting, having a no quit mentality. Now, let me just caveat this, say there are occasions where quitting is the right answer, and those are the exceptions. But in general, if you decide that that is a path you want, and then you go for it without, you just have a no quit mentality. And I think when I see that no quit mentality in people, that's the first sign to me, because it's not going to be about the best performer. It's about the person who's going to they get knocked down, they get back up. And I want to clarify, to me, I love the word perseverance rather than resilience, even though I understand people mean when they say resilience, and I love resiliency. But to me, resilience is getting knocked back down and getting back up, getting knocked down and getting back up. Where perseverance is getting knocked down, getting back up, and moving forward. And I think there's a difference there. And so perseverance to me, first of all, is key. The two other things I think are really important is preparation. Now, someone who prepares in advance, they do research, they study what they need to study. But I also believe, and this is where a lot of people don't do this, that you want to prepare how you want to think, feel, and respond in challenging circumstances, so that you respond more calmly, more, and you respond versus react. And the last thing is basically battling your enemies within. When I see people who are willing to acknowledge the emotion that comes with whatever struggle they've had and get over it and move on versus just bury it, that's another sign to me that they're ready to go.
Wow. What's the thing you're most proud of in your career in the Air Force?
Oh, most proud? Oh, I would have to say graduating weapons school. I went to U.S. Air Force Weapons School, which is the Air Force's Top Gun program, when my kids were 3 months and 18 months old. And it was a 6-month program. And it was the most challenging thing I've ever done in my entire life. So when I think about what makes what I've accomplished, what makes me proud, I would say that. But what also comes to mind for me when it's less about me, I love teaching. And things that have made me proud is when I've taught someone who that light bulb comes on and it makes that shift, and they really now step into it and they own it and they understand it. And, a lot of that, it's not my teaching, it's their willingness to open their mind and listen to what I'm saying and, soak it up. And I just love watching that process. So I've loved being a part of training other people.
Wow. That's amazing. Are there any phrases or quotes or mantras that you absolutely live by, or that you would really want to speak into the next generation of aviators?
Sometimes you just want to tell people, this is going to sound kind of silly, but I just want to say, Nike, like, just do it. Don't be afraid, just do it. And, I'd also like to say, strive for perfection, but don't be a perfectionist. Meaning, I don't want you to lower your goals because perfection isn't achievable. Don't lower your standards. Still strive for that perfection, but understand on the backside of it, there's going to be things that we can talk about, but it doesn't mean you're a failure. Those are your learning opportunities. So keep the standards high, but do a proper, debrief of yourself on the backside of it. Strive for perfection, but don't be a perfectionist.
I like it. Thanks so much, Tammy, for your service to the country, for your service to aviators in general now in your retirement and for being a guest on the podcast today.
You're welcome. It was an honor to serve and an honor to be on your podcast. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. For additional resources, head over to flygirlsguide.com. If you're inspired to pursue a path in aviation or want to support the women who do, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. And if today's conversation sparked something for you, share it with a friend. It's one of the best ways to grow the Fly Girls Guide community. Until next time.